Welcome back, guys. Now in this particular session we are towards the end of the biostat, right? And in this particular session I will be talking about different graphs, different graphical representations, which we shall see in our MCQs as well, right? So very important, because they are asking us mainly the image based questions are very important from this particular session. So you need to pick up those right in your visual based memory, and then you need to move forward in the PSM. So guys, now in this particular section we'll be talking about the graphical representation as far as biostat is concerned. So different types of graphs we are having, but very easy to understand. Okay, I'll be showing you the examples, right? So graphs, guys, here what is the need for graph? First of all, we need to represent the data, right? What is the biostat? I told you in the very first session of the biostat, I told you in the very first chapter that what is about the biostat, that collect the data, represent the data, you need to analyze the data, and accordingly you need to react to the analysis of the data. That is the biostat. Now this is the why do we need graph? Why do we need the graphical representation? We will be needing the graphical representation for the data. So we'll be presenting the data in the form of different graphs. That is the basic thing over here. So graphs, basically it is the data representation, or you can say it is one important tool for the representation of data, right? First thing, that we are using the graphs for the data representation. In the very first chapter only I told you about the scales of data, and I told you about the data that we shall be classifying our data into two types. I told you one is the qualitative type and another one is the quantitative type. Remember, guys, right? So same thing over here, because that's why in that particular chapter we were talking about the foundation, and that's how we are laying over the tree. Now data representation that is done by the graphs over here. We are having two types. One is the qualitative and another one is the quantitative data. So on the one side I am writing this is the quantitative data, and on the other side we will be having the qualitative data. Okay, so we are having different graphical representation. Some graphical representation will be telling us about the qualitative data, some graphical representation will be telling us about the quantitative data, right? So first of all, whenever the question comes, keep on repeating this thing, that whenever the question comes, you need to identify in the biostat, at least you need to identify that whether the variable which they are talking about, right, is it qualitative variable which they are talking about, or is it quantitative variable? Because half of your job is done over there once you will be knowing that is it quantitative or is it qualitative. Because if we talk about the test of significance, same thing I told you, that you need to know about the quantitative or the qualitative data, right? Now I'm talking about the graphical representation also. Now also I'm telling you that you should know about the quantitative data, qualitative data, because that's how you'll be knowing that whether you need to look for the graphs in the quantitative category or the qualitative category, because some graphs are representing the data for the quantitative data, right? Some graphs are representing the quantitative data, some graphs are representing the qualitative data. So once you will be having the clear picture in your mind about that thing, then it will be easier for us to choose the graph, right? So over here we shall be having two kinds of data, quantitative data, qualitative data, which we are actually talking about from previously only. Then quantitative data, we are having some kind of graphs over here. I'm just mentioning about them. So very first one, I'm sure all of you must have heard about this graph, that is a histogram, right? So very first one, that is a histogram, guys. I will be talking about the details of the graphs as well. Don't worry about that. I'll be showing you the images as well, how they are looking actually. But for now, let me just classify them over here. So histogram, that they are actually considering under the quantitative data, right? If you talk about the qualitative data, we are talking about the bar chart, right? We are talking about the bar charts. Okay, if next one in the quantitative category only, we might be having the frequency polygon, right? On the other side, we might be having the pie charts. Yes, all of you must have heard about this pie charts. Then we shall be having the frequency curve. As far as quantitative data is concerned, we shall be having the frequency curve, and there I will be telling you about the Ogive also, Ogive, Ogive. That is also the graph which we are talking about for the quantitative data. On the other side, we shall be talking about the spot maps, right? And I told you in the epidemiology as well that the cholera use this spot map, right? Then I will be showing you the image as well. After that, we shall be talking about the line chart. Line chart are also coming for the category of what? Quantitative data. Then on the qualitative side, we shall be using the pictogram. Pictogram for what? Pictogram for the qualitative data. For the quantitative data, again guys, the scatter plots which I told you for the correlation. Remember scatterograms or scatter plots, they are again for the quantitative data, and for the qualitative we shall be writing the Venn diagram. Okay, we shall be writing the Venn diagrams, right? So once we have talked about so many of things, so many of things. Now let's define them one by one, right? So the very first one which we are having right now, that is a histogram. Very important, guys. So very first one which we are having right now in front of us, that is the histogram. Okay, so let's talk about the histogram, guys. Histogram, if we talk about, this is the graphical representation of frequency distribution. Okay, listen to me very attentively. Graphical representation of frequency distribution. Which kind of data I'm talking about? Quantitative or qualitative? I'm talking about the quantitative data. Look at the classification. I'm talking about the quantitative data, right? So graphical representation of frequency distribution, this is the term over here, and it will be containing the rectangles. I will be showing you, it will be containing the rectangles that will be showing us the continuous quantitative data, right? I remember I told you in the very first chapter of biostat that quantitative data is the continuous data, qualitative data is the discrete data, right? So this is actually the histogram, is actually the graphical representation of the frequency distribution, and there they will be having the rectangular shape. Okay, rectangular shape, and usually between each rectangle they are not having the gaps. And as far as bar charts are concerned, which I will be talking about for the qualitative data, I will be telling you the differences in the histogram and the bar chart. Over there you will be clearing about that, you will understand that. But what is histogram, guys? Histogram is used for which data? Quantitative data. Histogram is used for continuous data or discrete data? Continuous data. Histogram can be used for which data scales? I told you quantitative data were having the two important scales, that were interval and ratio, where we used to calculate the mean values, right? Then on the qualitative side we were having the nominal and the ordinal data, right? So data scales, which data scales we are talking about over here? Interval and ratio are actually the data scales which are coming in the category of quantitative data, measurable data, right? Quantitative data, measurable data, continuous data, right? That is the thing over here, histogram. So what is the histogram? Continuous representation, the graphical representation of the frequency distribution in a form of rectangle that contains rectangles which are showing the frequency of set of continuous and quantitative data, set of continuous quantitative data. Okay, so very important for us to understand that. Look at the histogram, guys, over here. Here in the histogram we are seeing that rectangles, right? We are seeing the rectangles, and usually they are not having gaps in between. Usually I am saying, but how you will be examining in the MCQs, right? First thing is that just look at the gap. If the gap is not there in between, that usually it should be histogram. Second thing, you should be seeing that are they talking about quantitative data or qualitative data? Because if they are talking about quantitative data, then it is a histogram. But if they are talking about qualitative data, then it could be the bar chart also, okay, which I will be talking about in the next one, right? In some moments. So over here, histogram, guys, they are usually not having the gaps in between. They are usually representing the quantitative data. They are usually on the graphs, you can see the rectangles. They are not having the gaps in between generally, and that is the histogram. Right? Once you have understood about the histogram, guys, now these are the columns over here. These are the columns over here. You can see the columns, and they are joined columns, right? They are joined columns, right? They are the rectangles kind of thing. Okay, fine, guys. Now once we have talked about this, now we shall move on to the next one. That is the second one over here. That will be the bar chart. Now let's talk about the bar chart. Okay, bar chart. First of all, first question. I will be representing which data? I will be representing the qualitative data. I will be representing the qualitative data if I am using the bar chart. First question is solved. Second question, what data scales I am using over here? I will be using the nominal and the ordinal data scales, because these are the scales which were represented by the qualitative data. Next one, next MCQ, guys. All of these things are MCQs only, guys. So please be very attentive over here with me, bar chart. Right, next question over here which we shall talk about, that they are also called as the bar graph. They are also known as the bar graph. Come on, guys, they are also known as what? They are also known as bar graph. Okay, simple, very simple questions I'm telling you right now, but all of them are very important. Now they are usually shown by the graphical representation is there. They are actually shown by the columns or the rectangles, just like the histogram. But now this case, the columns which I will be showing you in the diagram, they will be having the gaps in between. Now this is general thing. They might be having the gap, they might not be having the gap. But generally, the bar chart are having the gaps in between the columns or the rectangles. Histograms are not having the gaps in between. That's how that could be the distinguishing feature. But that is not the 100% case always, right? That is also the thing. But the main difference over here is that histogram are representing the quantitative data, bar charts are representing the qualitative data. That is very sure. That is 100% true. Okay, fine guys. So usually columns in graph are separated by the gap. Understood? Usually I am saying separated by the gap. But that is very true that they are representing the qualitative data. Right, representing the qualitative chart I wrote over here. I'm sorry for that. I should be writing the qualitative data either, right? Qualitative data. Okay, understood guys. Fine. Now they should be having, they could be having the types, right? What are the types over here? I'm having simple types over here. We are having the simple type. Okay, that is the first one. Then it could be multiple bar chart or multiple bar graph, and the component bar graph. Okay, let me show you the diagrams as well. This is the simple bar graph or simple bar chart. What I am seeing over here is I am seeing the columns, I am seeing the rectangles over here, and there is a gap in between. Right? Can you compare that with the histogram which we saw? Histograms are not having the gap in between. They are not having the gap, but in the bar chart, in the bar graph, there is a gap in between. Okay, so that's how we can be remembering that. Second thing, here we are talking about the qualitative data. Look over here, they are talking about the people, number of people, right? So how many people are getting diseased by this particular risk factor? These are all the qualitative data. So these are the movies over here: comedy movie, action movie, romantic drama movie, thriller movie, and all, right? Horror movie and all. So this is talking about the qualitative data. Qualitative data, already we are talking about, always and always we are talking about the for the qualitative one, histogram or bar chart or bar graph. Okay, simple. Now look over here, that is a multiple bar chart. Here one column, second column, they are attached to each other, but after that there is a gap. Then again one column, second column, then again there is a gap. This is called as the multiple bar chart. Okay, and if you talk about this picture, what you will say about that? Here vertically we are having the columns over each other, right? First column, then second column, then third column, then fourth column. So column by column by column. So over one column, over one rectangle, there is one more, and then there is a gap in between again. Then there is a gap in between. So they are maintaining the gap, right? Here also they are maintaining the gap. Here also they are maintaining the gap, isn't it? They are maintaining the gap like this, maintaining the gap like this. Usually they maintain, right? Not always. Usually they maintain the gap. Okay, so that is about what? That is about the bar chart. And this bar chart is which bar chart? This bar chart is the component bar chart. So we are having 3 bar chart, guys. We are having 3 bar chart. One is the simple bar chart which I showed you over here. That is the simple bar chart. This is the simple bar chart. This is the multiple bar chart, and this one is the component bar chart or component bar graph. Okay, whatever you want to call it. Understood? Now once we have talked about the bar chart, now we shall be talking about the next one, that is the pie chart. Pie chart also represent the qualitative data. Okay, so third one I am talking about right now, that is the pie chart. Okay, pie chart also which data? Pie chart is also representing which data? This is also representing the qualitative data. No doubt about that, qualitative data. I will be talking about what data scales. You should be telling me, guys, right now. Okay, yeah, please tell me. Yes, I am listening. That is nominal and the ordinal, same like bar chart or the bar graph, isn't it? Nominal and the ordinal data scales. Okay, next point over here in the pie chart, they are represented as I was talking about in the histogram also I was talking about, and in the bar chart also I was talking about the representation with the columns or the rectangles. Here we are talking about the representation by the segment of a circle, represented by a segment of a circle. Usually we are not talking about the whole numbers, we are talking about the percentages over here, and percentages are a part of which data? Qualitative data only, right? So here we are actually talking about percentages. So pie charts are used in percentages data, right? The data which we want to represent in the percentages. This much percentage population is affected, that much percent population has been vaccinated, and that much percent population has been vaccinated in this state, that country, that XYZ, okay, like that. Then best way to represent the technical data, which graph you will be using, this is the best graph. So best way to represent the technical data, right? To represent the technical data, then I will be using the pie chart. Okay, very simple. Let's look at the pie chart. This is our favorite pie chart, right? You must have ate the pie also. If you are having a cake, you are taking a bite out of it. How you are cutting the cake? You are removing one piece of cake and you are having a pie chart, isn't it? And that will represent that this much part of the cake has been already eaten and this much has been left, for an example. So this is the pie chart, beautiful pie chart over here. Here they are talking about anything you can talk about regarding this. For example, here they are talking about the movie, right? Let's take it very simple, like comedy movies, action movie, romantic movie, drama movie, sci-fi movie, horror movie, and blah 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 XYZ, right? So that is about the pie chart, right? So it is representing the percentages, guys. It is representing the percentage. Look over here, this is representing the percentages, right? Here one particular segment is representing that. One particular segment, we might be coloring different colors might be used for representing the different segments, isn't it? So that is the thing, that is about the pie chart, right? Next we are having in front of us, that is the frequency polygon. Let's talk about the fourth one. This is the frequency polygon, right? Frequency polygon, right? I know till now it was easy, right? Frequency polygon is also very easy. Remember the histogram? Now remember the histogram? Yes, you remember. I can listen to that. Yes. So what was a histogram, guys? This was a histogram. There were columns, there were rectangle, in between there was no gap, right? Here if I will be marking the center, if I will be marking the center of these columns, centers of these columns, and if I will be joining them, okay, let's join them, okay, no problem, let's join them, okay. If I'll be marking the centers and I'm trying to joining them like this, right? Like a drawing. If I'm joining them, I will be getting data something like this. This yellow color which I'm showing over here right now, this is the frequency polygon. Yes, guys, congratulations, you understood frequency polygon. Very, very easy, isn't it? This is the frequency polygon. If I'm joining the centers of the columns in the histogram, that will give you the data of frequency polygon. Very, very simple, right? So here let's talk about the frequency polygon. Frequency polygon is nothing but it is used for, first of all, histogram, it was used for what? Quantitative data. So frequency polygon you will use for what? Quantitative data only, because we are getting the frequency polygon from the histogram. So whatever data histogram is representing, frequency polygon will represent the same data, that is the quantitative data. It's just that the way of representing it is different. The histogram is representing it in the form of columns or rectangles. The frequency polygon is representing it in the form of this kind of acute lines, right? Right. So over here, what I can see in the diagram also, there was a histogram present over here, and if I will be joining the centers of the histogram, if I was joining the centers of the histogram, dots of the histogram, then I was getting what? I was getting the frequency polygon, and just you need to join the dots. That's it, your job is done. So this is called as the polygon, and the columns are represented by, histogram is represented by the columns and polygon is represented by the lines over here, right? Joining the centers, joining the dots, isn't it? So about the polygon, frequency polygon, guys, again some very important point over here. It represents which data? It represents the quantitative data, right? It represents the quantitative data. It is talking about what data scales? They are talking about the interval and ratio, because these are the data scale which were represented by the numerical data, that is the constant data, or I mean that is the quantitative data, isn't it? Right. What else, guys? In the frequency polygon, we are just meeting the midpoints of each class interval and they are just joined together as a straight line. That is called as the frequency polygon. I hope you got this point, right? Now I'm moving on to the next one, guys, fifth one. That is the fifth one for our discussion, that is the Ogive charts. What are the Ogive charts now? Ogive charts, basically they are also known as the cumulative frequency diagram, right? They are also known as cumulative frequency diagram. Okay, frequency diagram. If you talk about, guys, about histogram or about bar chart, they are representing the variables. Variables are y-axis, x-axis. On the y-axis there could be frequency, and the x-axis there could be any variable. If instead of frequency I am using the cumulative frequency on the y-axis, so this is the cumulative frequency, this is some kind of variable, any variable it could be. So now this will become the Ogive chart. So in the Ogive chart, in the Ogive graph, whatever you want to call it, this is called as a cumulative frequency graph, cumulative frequency diagram. Here on the y-axis we are using the cumulative frequency, on the y-axis we are using the cumulative frequency, on the x-axis you can use anything. Here they are taking the range over here. What they are doing over here, just showing this particular line kind of thing. It could be anything, right? It is representing this kind of line over here, joining the dots like that. So that is the Ogive graph. So basically the point over here is that it is representing between the cumulative frequency and the x variable. It could be x, y, z, any kind of variable, right? Okay. So also known as the cumulative frequency diagram. Second point which I want to write over here, that a frequency polygon is drawn to represent the cumulative frequency distribution from a typical S-shaped curve, right? From typical S-shaped curve, it is also called as the Ogive. So over here, if you will be seeing over here, it would be having the S shape. It will be having the S-shaped curve, usually having the S-shaped curve like this, right? Like a snake, S-shaped curve. So this will be having the S-shaped curve, right? So let me write it over here itself, that in the Ogive chart or in the Ogive curve, these are also called as the frequency, cumulative frequency diagram, representing the data between the cumulative frequency and the x variable over here, any kind of variable I mean. So here a frequency polygon, guys, a frequency polygon, okay, is drawn to represent cumulative frequency, right? To represent cumulative frequency distribution from a typical S-shaped curve. Distribution from a typical S-shaped curve. Understood? So over here we understood that this is the S-shaped curve, right? S-shaped curve. Remember, so S-shaped curve will be seen like that. This is the Ogive graph or Ogive curve, representing the data between the cumulative frequency and some other variable. Now next one, let's talk about the line chart, guys. Let's talk about line chart, and that would be our sixth one. So let's talk about the line chart, right? Very simple. Line chart means basically in the chart you'll be seeing the line, okay, that I can understand. But line chart will be coming in which category? Is it quantitative data or is it qualitative data, right? It will be talking about the quantitative data. Remember that particular classification, right? Line chart I told you in the category of quantitative data. So line chart we are using for the quantitative data, right? So over here let's talk about that as well. What about the line chart, right? So if you talk about the line chart over here, guys, this is also called as the line graph, also known as the line graph or line diagram, also called as a line diagram, or it is also called as a line graph. Clear? Second point over here is that it is showing us the trend of events, right? It shows the trend of events. Remember in the descriptive epidemiology I told you about the trends, right? I told you about the trends over there, secular trend, right? For an example, which was happening over decades, right? There were short time trends, long time trends, right? All of these trends over there. But here they are talking about the trends of events. For example, what is the trend of having cancer in some kind of cervical cancer in some population, or having the tuberculosis cases in some people? What is the trend for the cases of dengue in some particular area? So these are the trends basically, right? So it is representing the trends of event. If the question is talking about the trend, which diagram or which kind of curve you would be like to use over there as an epidemiologist, for an example, then your answer would be the line chart or line graph or the line diagram, okay, telling us about the trend of events, or you can say that it is telling us about the change over passage of time, right? So that is the thing, over here, as you can see, this is the line diagram or line graph, right, or line chart, whatever you want to call it, right. So here we are seeing the line, right, and what we are seeing here, we are talking about the trends. As you can see over here that 1820, 1840, 60, 80, 1900, then they are talking about 2000, how the trend of some kind of disease they are talking about, okay, or how the prices of the stocks are increasing by day over there, how the economy of India is growing, actually how the GDP of India is growing, or how the GDP of growing any kind of country is growing, like that. Many of the things you can talk about. If you're talking about the trends, then best diagram, best chart to use is the line diagram or the line graph, right. Okay, the next one which we shall talk about over here, that is the spot map. So this is the diagram, guys, for the spot map over here, right. Spot map will be telling us about the qualitative data. Obviously I'm not writing that because I have talked about that in the classification only, that it is coming about the qualitative data, right. Cholera was used for spotting this particular kind of graph which they use, that is the spot map graph. This is the spot map over here, that can be asked. This picture might be the spotter in your MCQ exam, right. So that can be asked over here. This is a spot map, okay. So it will be representing the qualitative data. Second thing is, what data scales I'm talking about? Nominal and the ordinal, because I'm talking about the qualitative data. Okay, next, what is this kind of graph, guys? What can you represent? Can you tell me what kind of picture is it? Here what I can see is that if you are visiting some kind of cafe, right, in the COVID era especially, or if you are visiting some places, right, they will be having some sign pasted on their walls or pasted on their doors and something like that, right. And what kind of things we can actually understand, because the pictures tells the story. That is the thing over here. So over here you can see that they are showing us this particular diagram, for example, right. So it means the get your temperature done. Here the person is using the mask and they are having the thermogun, right. So here it means that they are trying to tell us that get your temperature checked over here. Then the second one, please wear, they are showing us the mask, so please wear the mask, right. These kind of symbols were very popular one among the COVID era. Then please use hand sanitizers, for example this one. And here we are using that please practice the social distancing of 6 feet, right, away from one people, and in the banks and in the hospital and all of these things, right. You were seeing these kind of images and all. So basically these are the pictures we are using for conveying some message to the people, right. And usually it is very useful for those people who are the laymen or who are not much educated, right. To those people, if you want to convey our message, it is very easy kind of way to convey our message to them. So this is called as the pictogram. So through the pictures we are conveying the message to the people, right. That is called as the pictogram. So here we shall write that this is the pictogram. Now it can be anything, you're seeing some kind of hoarding while driving the vehicle or something like that. You're seeing the hoarding on the road and they are representing some signs over there, right, about anything, right, about anything. It could be about the advertisement of some company, it could be the message from the government side, or it could be anything, right. Now then if you talk about over here, next one, this is what? This is the scattergram. This is the scattergram, and we have already talked about that. I know you should be telling this is the scattergram or scatter plot for the correlation purpose, right. So this is the scatter plot or scattergram, right. So in this particular session, what we have talked about the several graphs. We have talked about that some graphs are representing the quantitative data, some graphs are representing the qualitative data, right. Then we had to talk about one by one discussion, that how the histogram is looking, how the bar chart is looking, how the frequency polygon looks, how the frequency polygon looks, how the Ogive chart looks, how the spotter map is looking like, how the spot map is looking, how the pictogram is looking, how the scatter plot is looking. Then we had to talk about that how the Ogive is actually looking over there, how the pie chart and the line chart are looking. We had to talk about this thing. And quantitative and qualitative data, first task will be that you will be understanding, is it quantitative data, qualitative data given, and then accordingly you will be actually trying to solve the MCQ, that which kind of graph they are asking us, right. So I hope you enjoyed this series of biostat, guys, biostatistics. Write the reviews, and I will be seeing you in the next one. Thank you so much.